So I put a photo up on my Instagram this morning, which was a shot I took 2 days ago at a wedding, and it was just a simple shot of a backlit flash in the rain with the couple. I'll put it up here so you can see it. But I got so many messages and comments on them already saying, how did you do it? Maybe you should make a video on flash. And it's a really simple subject, honestly. I think people make it a lot more confusing than it has to be. But I totally get it. Flash seems complicated, especially if it's not something you've done before. So after today's video, hopefully it's going to seem a little bit more easy to get your head around, and you'll be able to go out and try stuff out. Firstly, you don't really need a lot to get into doing this. You can just use a basic speed light. Keep in mind also, this is just the way I use flash. There's many ways to use it. So firstly, let's talk about the equipment I'm using. Now I'm using the godox system, and I've actually done reviews on the two flashes that I use already, so I'll put those in the description if you want to check them out. But I use godox, and it's been, for the most part, really reliable, and they're affordable, and they just work really well. So the two I have two of these AD200s. Now these are the bigger type flash. These are really great for setting up on light stands and lighting up an entire reception room. I find they're plenty powerful enough to light up 200 or 300 person reception, no worries at all. And the batteries last for ages on them, so they're quite small as well. I did have a couple of AD600s a while ago, and they were the big meaty ones, and they're definitely a little bit more powerful, but I never used them at full power. I was always at like a tops quarter power, and that was if it was like a really big room. The other thing I have for these AD200s is the barn door attachment and the mesh, what's it called? The cheese grate kind of thing that goes on there to direct the light more. So the reason you would use those is just if you really want to beam the light to a specific location, have it really kind of narrow beam like a torch. Otherwise you can just take it off, it just unclips, and you can use it just more as a floodlight. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit. So two AD200s, and I have a godox V1. Now these are the only flashes that I use, so I have 3 all up. And this does me for everything I ever want to do. Other than the flashes itself, I have 2 triggers. So I have a X2TS trigger, which I think is the latest one. This is the most recent one I bought. And I also have this one, which is the X Pro S trigger. I do find the X2TS trigger is a little bit more reliable in terms of firing the flash. It doesn't seem to miss as many shots as this one. For the most part, I do find they're both really good, and I never really have many issues with them at all anyway. And other than that, I just have a couple of cheap light stands. I'm using one for this mic now. They're pretty universal, nothing fancy, just cheap Chinese light stands. Now the reasons I use flash, there's really 3 main reasons I use flashes myself personally, and bearing in mind this is coming from a wedding photographer, but it's going to be the same for events or anything like that. So the first reason is probably the most common, and that is just setting them up in a reception area when maybe there's really ugly colored lighting, like if the whole room is really orange. Usually I'll set a couple of these AD200s up, and that would just kind of counteract the horrible color. Or if it's really dark, I'm not actually too worried about actual darkness anymore with these Sony cameras, because they're just so good in low light, and I find I can shoot at 12,800 ISO and still get plenty clean enough images for a large print. For me, it's more about the look. If the room has a funny colored light, like a lot of venues will have really purple lights or something like that, and they just make skin tones look really bad. And in this situation, I'll try and draw something on the screen so you guys can see it for yourselves. But usually I'll have one at the back of the room pointed straight at the bridal table, and then I'll have another one kind of at the end of the bridal table behind where all the people are going to be doing their speeches. What that means is I have the bridal table fully front lit, and then the backlit one just lighting up the back and the faces also of the people looking at the person speaking. I hope that makes sense. The drawing should make more sense than my words. Now the reason I do that is because I'm not often standing right in front of the bridal table shooting right at them. I'm usually off to the side shooting down the table either ends, and it just gives you a really nice 3D look and makes them pop out from the background a little bit. I personally quite like that flared look from the background when you're shooting from behind the people speaking. So that's pretty much what I do that with. In some situations, I'll set one up in opposing corners, so at 45 degrees facing into the middle of the room. But that's usually my go-to setup. One thing to note, if you are having one pointed straight at the bridle table and you're shooting the same way as the flash, so your flash is like this and you're shooting that way also, it's going to look quite flat and not really flattering. So you're just bearing in mind that you're not going to want to put the flash where you're going to be standing. For the most part, you want to have it either on a 45 degree or a backlit situation. That's going to get you the most flattering light. In other situations, this V1S can also act as a trigger. So if I have this on top of my camera, I can control these AD200s with the V1S as well. So it's kind of like having a flash and a trigger at the same time. So if I have a really big room, for example, sometimes very rarely, but sometimes I'll put this on top of my camera, use it as a trigger and just kind of bounce this one off the ceiling or a wall behind me or something like that, just to add a little bit of fill light. So that's the main and most common reason that I use flash for. Now the second reason for using flash for me personally is these backlit rain shots, or just creative shots I call them, when you're using the flash to create an effect. Now these are really popular in the rain, like you saw in that photo this morning, or just any of these other situations that you're seeing here. Now these ones are really, really easy, and they're much easier than people think they are. So I often get comments when you put a photo up like this saying, wow, I wish I knew how to do that. And I just want to solve that problem for you guys today. So the best way to think about flash in general, especially when you're using, for these creative portraits, is set your camera to manual. You never want to be in aperture priority when you're using flash like this. Now the first thing you want to do is set the ambient exposure. So have your camera in manual, like I said, and take a photo and make sure on the back of the screen without any flash, the background looks like how you want it to look. So for example, if you want a little bit of the sky, maybe it's gone sunset, but it's not quite black yet, and you want a little bit of that ambient exposure, you want to get that down in the camera first, and then you want to add your flash after. So that goes for any situation where you're using flash. You really want to set your ambient exposure first, and then go ahead and you're just adding flash into the situation. So it's not like you've got to balance it all first. Really, you're just taking a photo, setting the entire scene, and then adding the flash to get the effect you want to get. Now, for example, all of these backlit flash photos that you're seeing now, I'll usually start with the flash power around 1/16 to 1/8 power. It's going to vary depending on the flash you're using, but just try it around there and see how it looks. Now, like I said, once you've got your ambient exposure down, it's really just adding that pop of flash. So just turn the flash on, try it out, see how it looks. If it's too bright, just use your trigger to turn it down or turn it up if it's too dark. The other thing you need to think about with backlighting is just where you have the flash situated. So if you have someone hiding behind the couple, pointing the flash at them, and for me personally, I am usually just pointing the flash straight at their backs, maybe very slightly up sometimes, depending on what I'm trying to light. But the key when I'm talking about where you're putting the flash is you don't want the actual filament of the flash fully exposed to the camera. I find personally it works best when there's just a very tiny sliver of the flash pointing out of the couple, sort of out of the edge of the photo. If you have it fully exposed, I have an example here from this wedding in the weekend. I had Ethan walking behind the couple, just holding the light stand with the flash on it. And we were just kind of moving around to try and line up the flash with the couple in between. So here's a photo where the flash is all the way out, so it's just kind of whited out everything. There's one here where it's kind of half in, half out, maybe a little bit too much out. And it looks better, but it's still a little bit too much. And then this last one is the flash kind of just peeking in between them. And for me, that gets the best effect, especially in rain photos like that. So to summarize with the backlit shots, set your camera in manual, take a shot without any flash added to the scene. The couple's going to be really, really dark, obviously. But set the ambient exposure to what you want the rest of the photo to look like, and then just add your pop of flash into it. It's really that simple. So really the biggest thing is just getting out there and trying it. You just need one trigger and a speed light and you're good to go. Once you get more comfortable with that, maybe you can expand more into like 8200s or whatever brand you're using, but I wouldn't go out and spend a whole lot of money on a whole bunch of flash items that you don't need. For me, I just have the bare essentials that I'm going to ever need. I'm never going to need any more than this. I do have a few video lights that we're going to go over as well. That's going to be in a separate video. But that's it for the backlit creative shots. Now the last reason I ever really use flash for at a wedding is the dance floor, and for that I'm really just using the Godox V1 here. You can use any speed light, even the tiny, I think it's a 350T or something Godox light for the dance floor is fine. You really don't need anything like this, but I find the V1S is really great because the battery lasts for ages and it's just really powerful for an on-camera flash. So for the dance floor photos, I do two options because I don't want it to be all of the same. So usually we'll do the first dance, and then once everybody starts getting into the groove and starts dancing, I'll chuck my V1 on and I'll just have my flash pointed pretty much straight up. Sometimes it'll be kind of off to the back and to the side a little bit, so I'm bouncing it off whatever walls I have, but that's not always going to work, so it does depend on the situation and the reception venue that you're at. So yeah, I'll get a series of photos with the bounce flash, and then we'll get into more of the party mode when people really start losing their minds on the dance floor, and I'll pretty much straight up and I have done a video on this already before, but there's one thing I have to correct. I'll have my flash pretty much pointed straight at them, maybe just very slightly up. I find if you point it up very slightly, it can make the image darker at the bottom, which I think looks really cool. But just play around with it. But the point is just point it straight at them. Now the point I have to correct was in my previous video, which was quite a while ago now, I said that you want to put the flash in rear curtain sync. And that you don't actually have to do that. That's totally fine to just have the flash in normal, normal fill flash, whatever mode it is on your camera. And that's how I do it now because I find it easier. So when you have it in rear curtain sync, what that means is you're firing the shot. Say if you have a 1 second exposure, for example, when you press the shutter, the flash isn't going to fire until the end of the exposure, and that bit where the flash fires is the most important because that's when you're going to freeze the couple in the frame and have the actual, the faces and the expressions is when the flash fires. So for me, I have it in just standard fill flash now, and the settings I use are pretty much the same every single time. I could do it blindfolded and it would be totally fine. So for me, usually I go to my Tamron 17 to 28mm and I have it wide open at 17mm, and either that or I have my 24mm G Master. Depends on the mood I'm in, but I do find wider the better for the dance floor photos. Now settings wise, this will work for you on your camera. I guarantee it. If you set it up right, this will work. So for me, I set my shutter speed to half a second, 0.5. That's my shutter speed. It's always 0.5, half a second shutter speed. My ISO I set to 200, and then I set my aperture to about f9 usually. So f9, half a second, ISO 200, and then my flash power varies. It's going to vary depending on your flash, but that's a really easy thing to set. But I would start at about a 1/4 power to an 1/8 power and see how that looks. Now the biggest key is the focus. So it's really hard to focus on a dark dance floor at f9. So what I do is because I have it at f9 and I'm using a wide angle, I'll switch it to manual focus, and then I'll set it manually to 2 meters. So at f9 and 2 meters, everything's going to be in focus from where your camera is to the back of the dance floor. No worries at all. So you don't even have to focus. All you do is just set it up and just start firing away. Now because you have your flash set on front curtain shutter or standard fill flash, you want to frame it up, take the shot, and then you can kind of just wave your camera around and get that creative look with light flares and stuff like that, and light trails, sorry. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions, put a comment below and I'll answer those as soon as possible. Otherwise, I hope this video helped you guys out, and I want to see all your dance floor photos. So tag me on Instagram, whatever you want to do. If you've gone out and used these techniques, try out some backlit photos because it's really cool. I often wish that I have rain. I tend to be lucky with weather with my clients. We never get rain even when it's supposed to rain. So I've been really happy lately that we've been getting rain at night so we can go out and do these photos. So let me know what you guys want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video in a couple of days.